I'm Coach Kaspar. I teach U.S. history.
Howdy, I'm Coach Coovert. I teach U.S. history, and we're here to answer Google's most asked questions.
That was so stupid. Hi, I'm Coach Kaspar, and I teach U.S. history.
I'm Coach Coovert. I teach U.S. history also, and we're here today to answer Google's most asked questions about history.
Got it.
I like it.
Yeah. All right, World War. Doesn't distinguish between one or
No.
two, but World War. Maybe it's three with
Maybe
what's
it's three.
coming out.
Oh dear gosh, poor Ukraine right now.
Was World War I important?
Yes, it was very.
Yes.
It was very, very important.
So World War I, basically kind of like a family feud, if you want, to go down that route. But at the end of the day, it's important because of the ramifications that come from it. It's the first industrialized war. You're going to have roughly 40 million people who die from it, which is absolutely catastrophic. But then the Treaty of Versailles that is signed that concludes the war inherently directly leads to World War II, which leads to 80 million people dying, which leads to the Cold War, which leads to more issues, especially for the United States, and so forth. Everything is, traced back to this moment, this decision.
Yes.
I don't know how else to say that, but yes, it's extremely important.
And he just mentioned the family feud. There's a point where the Kaiser of Germany and the Tsar of Russia were actually cousins. If you want to read some intriguing letters, go to their World War I letters, and they are deeply in love with each other as family members.
Let's just say that family tree pretty much goes straight down.
Yes. Did you ever hear about what happened on the ship?
Which ship?
The Kaiser's cruise, private cruise.
I don't know.
Oh, how
Maybe.
the Tsar and him got super drunk and peace treaties.
I don't know.
And it didn't happen, and everyone's like, you can't do that!
When did the U.S. enter World War II? Dos amigo. You got this?
Yeah, I got it. Declaration of War, December 8th, 1941 is whenever the United States entered the war. December 7th, we were infamously attacked by the Imperial Japanese at a place called Pearl Harbor, Hawaii.
We didn't know it was coming.
No.
Surprise. What year did the U.S. enter World War II?
Oh gosh, this one's tough because I think we just talked about it.
Just did that.
In 1941, World War II started in 1939 with the German blitzkrieg of Poland, but we would not get involved for 2 years because there's a strong isolationist movement going on at this point. That kind of goes back to World War I, and so those isolationists are able to keep us out of the war for 2 years until something does happen where Japan does attack us.
How did World War II impact the U.S. today?
Impact
Yeah. Starting right after you go into the Cold War, because now we turn our attention to the Soviet Union, our great superpower enemy for the next 45, 46 years. You have different things that are going to be put in place, different foreign policies that we still, in a way, adhere to today. So any country that's willing to work with us in a capacity to push democracy, capitalism, or our ideal concepts, we're going to work handedly with them, whether it's economically or militarily. You have big things, but rather unknown things like Eisenhower, who becomes our president, who's going to implement the universal highway system throughout the United States. Many of you drive on 59, 69 right now, I-10, I-45. These are things put in place because Eisenhower, who was the supreme general in Europe, noticed what the Nazis did with things like the Autobahn.
But that all has an impact going back to World War II. Just our uniforms, for example, all come from the German military at this point. Our helmets are designed after their helmets. The V-2 rockets would be designed after NASA's program. Lots of controversy with NASA also. Some of the scientists that come over. Our submarines are now based off of the German U-boats. And so tanks are also based off the Panzers of Germany. And so we have a total rechange in our military because of what we see with the German military and how effective a fighting force it was at this time. Oh, where did Hitler go after World War II? I'll let you.
All right. So there's plenty of conspiracies out there. I don't really adhere to it because as a teacher, I have to teach to that STAR test, right? And they don't really push those conspiracy theories. But basically, he died. I mean, and you're gonna, I think, elaborate on that. But the conspiracy theory that he didn't die and that he actually escaped, and this could be on a submarine, this could be in a plane, depending on who you're talking about. But he's gonna make his way to Argentina, live his life out there. There's these images of an individual who looks just like Hitler, supposedly, doctored or not, I don't know. But that is the most famous conspiracy theory, is that he actually lived out his life in Argentina in Latin America.
Mm-hmm. Talking about like his death. So whenever him and his wife, newly wife at the time,
wasn't his niece?
Was it his niece?
Yeah, it's really weird. But
it was weird.
No.
And also, there's a lot of conspiracies about why the most powerful man in Europe got married at the age of 54. And
she was younger.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot of weird, creepy stuff going on with that. But, so, as he's passed away in the bunker where he's at in Berlin, it was protected by a group called the SS. The SS swore on not the German state, but on Adolf Hitler, to protect and defend Adolf Hitler. So the only people that have stated that Adolf Hitler died were the SS individuals, who they stated after both him and Eva passed away, they went up, put their bodies in the grave, burned them. So how do we actually know what they state is actually true? And that gives rise to a lot of the conspiracies. And the other conspiracy was the Soviets actually found Hitler's skull, but then lost it magically in the 60s.
I don't know if you said they committed suicide. Mm-hmm. So they committed suicide, and then the bodies were burned, and this was done supposedly to keep the bodies from being drugged or hung in manners that European history would be recognizable of.
Benito Mussolini.
Yep. All right. Did an assassination start World War I?
I'll let you do this one.
Yes, right. But I'm not going to lie to you. There's a pretty good chance that World War I inevitably happens anyways, but this is a good launching point. And so the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand from Austria-Hungary by the Serbian group, the Black Hand, absolutely is the starting factor, because soon after, Austria-Hungary declares war. Russia comes to the aid of Serbia, then you have France joining, then you have Germany joining Austria, and it just gets out of hand from there. But the assassination is absolutely what triggers the event.
As Franz Ferdinand and his wife are going away, Franz Ferdinand decides that he wants to go to the hospital where a lot of his troops who saved his life are at because of their wounds. The driver accidentally takes a wrong turn, ends up at a local cafe.
It's a bad Uber.
Yes,
bad Uber.
Very bad Uber. And so at this cafe, there's none other than a young individual who's a part of the Black Hand group, who's there after the failed assassination, trying to rethink his life, and he realizes who's out in the car, goes out, shots are heard, and then both Franz Ferdinand and his wife pass away. I'm just saying, if you want to tell your grandkids one day like stories, tell them about how the fact that you're a driver who caused World War I and the death of possibly 40 to 50 million individuals. You're the reason why totalitarian regimes rose up during the interwar years.
The root is the driver.
All of it can be traced back to the fact that you didn't study a map well enough to know the route from this area to a hospital, and you ended up at a local cafe. So studying maps are pretty important.
I'm bad at directions too, not going to lie.
All right.
We're going.
Oh,
turn it around.
Tricky
there
day.
You go. Nixon. If you don't know that, this is President Richard Nixon. Who's Nixon's vice president? Let's just go with the famous one.
Yeah.
Spiro Agnew.
Oh, gosh.
So Nixon is a problem in itself. Agnew is actually a problem as well. So your vice president and your president both are going to be, what's the word? Frauds and criminals. I don't know. So at the top level, highest level of government, we have some problems. Spiro Agnew, who was the vice president for Richard Nixon, is actually commits tax fraud and is going to be removed from office. So, fun start. Yeah, that one.
Why did Ford pardon Nixon?
What does that mean, Coach? Pardon.
Pardon. As a presidential power, you're allowed to pardon or give forgiveness to any criminal, and your sentence is pretty much
Time served.
yeah,
Done.
it's done, and you are not a criminal anymore based off that.
Ford, when he becomes president, I want you to imagine being in a position and you get that position, but every time you do a press conference or anytime someone asks you questions, it's about your predecessor. It's about the person who was before you. And the person before you did, some really terrible things. So you're having to answer for that person's crimes or that person's decisions. That can get really old pretty fast.
Oh, yes.
And then on top of that, Ford believed that the country needed to heal, that we needed to move forward and find a way to move past this very, very dark moment in history that we call Watergate. And so what he does is he pardons Nixon so that he can try to avoid dealing with this issue any longer. About half of America agrees that that was the right move, and about half of America agrees that that's the wrong move, because now you have people at the top level of government, our president, who does things that are illegal and just gets away with it. Why was President Nixon a good president? It doesn't say that. It says good president, but it was a good president.
Nixon, good president. Love the grammar on this. So talking about Nixon, the reason why he could be considered to be a good president was his foreign policy. I mean, Nixon ran on the policy that he was going to end the Vietnam War, get our troops out, process called Vietnamization, let the South Vietnamese fight where American troops have been fighting. And so he was able to do that. There was still some controversy about Cambodia and Laos, the bombings afterwards, Rolling Thunder operation, and all this other stuff, and the fall of South Vietnam. But he fulfilled his promise. He was able to get the troops out of South Vietnam, end the war for Americans.
Think of it, we're fighting an enemy, and there are other enemies who are supporting them. And so our policy is, well, maybe if we relax our relationship with the two bigger enemies, maybe that'll help us withdraw from the smaller conflict. And so détente allows us to better our relationship with China, with the Soviet Union, actually placate them against each other, and then move forward from there, withdrawing from Vietnam.
What did Nixon do? Nixon is known for a scandal called Watergate.
Yeah.
Ever since then, pretty much every single scandal has some sort of gate on it because of Richard Nixon. But Richard Nixon was a very suspicious individual. He didn't believe that pretty much he couldn't really trust anyone. He literally bugged his own offices and would actually have tapes of like individuals talking, and he could use that as blackmail. What leads us into Watergate. And so Watergate became the huge scandal during the 1972 election. Pretty much Richard Nixon, by the end of it, would win. He wins 49 out of 50 states. One of the most lopsided victories in all of America.
So Watergate is a complex in different facets, right? But one of them is that the Democratic National Committee offices are positioned there. And since he's a Republican, obviously the Democratic group is the opposite political party. What is going to happen is that there are going to be some men that we call the plumbers who go in and they're going to bug these offices. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Nixon told them to do that or issued this order to be done. In fact, we don't really have the evidence to prove that. But it was issued by top levels within the Republican Party itself. When these plumbers go, they're going to be found out. And so whenever they go to prison, Nixon is actually going to use his position as president to pull the FBI off of the case, which is seen as a power move that is highly illegal because he's stopping an investigation that would obviously lead back to his administration. But on top of that, he's going to issue money to quiet these plumbers, basically hush money. So pay off these people, hey, take the fall, don't say anything, I'll pay your families, and we'll just move on from here because we don't want this to lead back to my administration or to me in general. Nixon actually starts firing people as this moves forward and more information comes out, and he starts saying, hey, I'm going to fire this guy, this is your fault, it was their fault, not my fault, I didn't know about this. And then those people start turning on Nixon and the truth comes out before he can be impeached, right? And this is a star question. Before he can be impeached, he is going to resign. He is the only president in our history, to resign from office, but he was never actually impeached because he resigned prior to that actually going through. What is the Nixon Doctrine? What Nixon Doctrine?
He had a doctrine. It's called his Bourne Doctrine, but it's just pretty much a relaxation of tensions. The start of the time. No one really calls it the Nixon Doctrine. It's just detente. Just leads to SALT I. Pretty much the reduction of nuclear weapons throughout the world.
Yep. Was Nixon a hippie? That's you, Bubba.
Nixon was the complete opposite of a hippie. He did not love hippies one bit. It's actually pretty funny. You had Richard Nixon as president in the White House in the early 1970s. The last president in the 1970s would possibly be considered one of the biggest hippies, Jimmy Carter, who possibly did some stuff with a very famous country artist who's known for his extracurriculars. But that president, Jimmy Carter, would possibly be a hippie. But no, Nixon was completely anti-hippie.
He sees them as a very big problem in America and our society, and so he wants to put as many of them in jail, quiet them as much as possible, pass certain laws to root them out and hurt them. We'll not go into detail on that, but yes, he was absolutely an anti-hippie.
You want to read it?
Who did Kennedy run against? The guy we just talked about, Richard Nixon. So he's going to run against Nixon, who actually was supposed to win, was the favorite to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But some things will play out. Most people remember the debates on television. It was the first televised debate for the presidential debates, and Kennedy does a great job, looks presidential. Nixon struggles a bit, and Kennedy is going to end up coming out on top. Now, there's some other things that tie into that, but that's just one of the most renowned things that tie back to him.
Yeah. What is the Kennedy curse? Pretty much any individual who's ever ran or is president with the name of Kennedy has not met a very smooth ending.
Yeah. They die. Just letting you know. Why was JFK important? You want me to do that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so JFK, he doesn't even serve a full term as president, right? But he comes in with a lot of ideals. He's extremely young, which represents a massive part of the U.S. population because we're used to getting older presidents. And with his assassination, JFK becomes more of a martyr than anything else. He becomes remembered for what his ideals were, what he expected America to be, what he wanted us to move forward becoming. There's the famous quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." It's take initiative to better yourself, take initiative to better our society, and take an initiative to better the way that America is perceived across the world in general. And so, though he never got to finish his term, it's more what he represented, what he stood for, and this idealism of what America could potentially be in a positive way. And so he becomes remembered in that way.
What is John F. Kennedy's speech about?
Was that the speech? Was that the one? Or is there
or are you asking about the speech of why does Rice play Texas?
I don't know. So there's different speeches. I don't know which one that's referencing. The quote I just gave you is an important one because that was the inaugural address. But then you also have, hey, let's put a man on the moon by the end of the decade.
Yes.
That's pretty idealistic and pretty remarkable, the fact that we did that as well. So it just depends on which speech that you're talking about.
The speech I'm thinking about, and a speech that's very important to Houston, you're talking about he would actually go to Rice, the football stadium, and he's trying to pass the civil rights programs, and talking to Texas about civil rights in the 1960s was not an easy thing to do, as he would find out a few days later on. But pretty much, he asked a question, it's like, why am I doing this? Well, and I love this quote because my wife is a Longhorn, so she would appreciate this. But pretty much he asked the question, why am I doing this? Well, why does Rice University keep playing Texas if they know they're going to get blown out every single year? It's because it is embarrassing to watch on football. But it's the idea that, hey, even though it doesn't look good, it brings people together.
Fun question.
John F. Kennedy, best looking. Was he the best looking? Well, I can't. I'm not really interested.
I'm taking.
No, yeah,
Married.
sorry. You gotta compete
Sorry.
with my wife. Ah,
Yeah, I knew this was going.
yeah, exactly. That's why I didn't want to leave.
JFK affair. Not with who. That's just good because there's multiples. But yes,
Affairs.
JFK is going to be infamous for having many exploitationist affairs.
Talking about affairs, I mean, so you have Rose, who's Jacqueline. You have the Eagle, who's JFK. And so the Secret Service, starting on Friday nights, would have a game to where Rose and Eagle never in the same room together. And so typically, there would be the Eagle with a couple of other code names, aka females. And so their job was to make sure Jacqueline never knew, well, she knew.
Oh, she knew.
Oh, she knew that JFK was having all these affairs. And so in one instance, in the media room where all the press conferences happen, that used to be an old swimming room. And of course, JFK, staying fit, goes for swims. Well, one instance, Rose, Jacqueline, decides that she wants to go swim. Her Secret Service cannot convince her not to, and as First Lady, she insists, so they have to follow her. Well, Eagle's in there with two other females, and so they have to rush him out, but the problem is there's only one hallway coming in and out. So they stick JFK, the President of the United States, and two females in a closet in the pool room for about 30 minutes just to make sure that Jacqueline did not know there was affairs going on. But again, she knew. So they played a very interesting game.
Don't have affairs. They're not.
Yes,
they're not
no.
good. All right, just don't do that.
Yeah,
Don't hide in closets.
indeed.
All right, thank you guys for watching. We hope you learned a little bit about U.S. history.
Until next time.